Hello, this is a VBA Visual Basic for Applications tutorial, a slightly longer video probably than the usual ones, but the reason that I'm doing this is to show you how to create a resource that I've used in my lessons in schools and which can really help to get students thinking and making additional connections between topics. Let me show you how it works first of all. So here's a PowerPoint presentation, and if I just hit F5 to run this is just the title slide. Then we go on to the main slide and we have this Go button here. Now if I click the Go button, what happens is PowerPoint pulls a text file which is in the same folder as the PowerPoint presentation, and that text file simply lists a whole load of keywords for whatever topic it is we're currently looking at. It then randomly chooses any two of those words or entries in that text file and then displays them on this slide. And I can keep on clicking this Go button and it will just randomly choose any two words from that text file. And how do I use this in class? Well, what I do is I get the students to try to come up with a sentence which connects the two random words that are displayed on the board. This gets them thinking about how they can connect or relate one topic to another. In some cases it's quite straightforward. In others it requires quite a lot of thinking. But you can see some of them are more easy than others, the ways in which students could connect the two words without obviously using get-out sentences such as peripheral and network are two words which you'll come across in computer science. Obviously those sort of sentences are not allowed, but if they can come up with a reasonable sentence, such as in this particular case, for example, I don't know, you could say a computer network allows shared access to a range of peripheral devices such as printers. There you go. That wasn't planned, but there we are. That's just simply what the resource is like, and this is a fairly basic, simple one which I've just thrown together to sort of do a demonstration. So I'm going to show you how to create this, and I think one of the most powerful things about the way this has been set up is that you can simply copy this PowerPoint file and give it to anybody, and all they have to do is put that particular PowerPoint file, this one here, in the same folder as a text file which is called Words. Now if I wanted to, I could simply change this text file here to include anything at all, and my PowerPoint presentation would automatically update. So for example, if I just quickly create a new text document, and I'm going to rename this old text document, just call that Q, and then we'll call the main one that we're using Words. So if I now open up Words and I type in here a few random words, so we'll just put some colours in here, so red, blue, yellow, green, violet, indigo, pink, black, white, there we are, just for example, and we'll just close that. So now I have my text file called Words within this presentation folder. What will happen is if I go back into this presentation here and I run it again, it'll just first of all look for a text file in the same folder that this presentation is in called Words, and if it finds it, then it will pull all those words out and then make them available. So if I click Go now, you can see we're getting random words chosen from that text file I just created. So of course you can use this for a variety of topics, you could use it for a variety of year groups, or even a variety of different subjects across a school or college. So let's get started with how to create this particular presentation. So I'm starting from scratch here with a brand new PowerPoint presentation. So open that up. Make sure when you save it that you save it as a macro enabled presentation. So underneath the file name, change the type of file from PowerPoint presentation to PowerPoint macro enabled presentation. Because we're going to be adding some code and we need PowerPoint to allow that code to run. So the first thing is I'm going to change the layout of this presentation to blank, get rid of all those things, and then I'm going to head up to the Developer tab at the top. Now, if you don't have the Developer tab, it's really easy to add. Just go to any tab at all and right-click on a blank area of it, click on Customize the ribbon, and on the right-hand side you'll find a list of all available tabs, and if you don't have it displayed, you'll find the Developer tab there with an empty tick box. Simply put a tick in there and click OK, and you will have your Developer tab. Now we need to add 3 controls to this sheet. So I'm going to add a label first of all. So I'm going to click on that and add a label. Now I'm not going to worry too much about the formatting of this, the appearance. This is just something to show how the guts of it work, and you can play around with the appearance later on. But just in case you're not sure how to change the appearance of these ActiveX controls, as they're called, just go up to the top here and click on Properties. That opens this Properties panel, and you can have a little play through some of these, but for example you've got things like the font color or fore color here, which you can change. You've got the font itself. If you want to change that, you can simply click on this little ... ellipsis button on the right hand side. You've got border colors and back colors, things like that, and you've also got the text alignment option here, so you can make that centered if you wish. So you can play around and change the appearance of these buttons, the labels, sorry. But first of all I want 2 of them, so I'm going to copy that and paste a second label underneath. And then I need my buttons, so that's the third and final control. So back up here, click on Command button and draw a command button underneath. Now the one thing that we will need to know is the name of each of these 2 labels. They will be different. So we click on the Properties button here, and at the top we find that this first label is called Label 1, and if we click on the second label we can see its name is Label 2. Don't be confused by the fact that they both look like they're called Label 1. That's just simply the caption of the label, which we can change in the caption property here. We can type anything we wanted to in there. But the first label is called Label 1, the second is called Label 2. So that's it, that's all we need to add to our slide. So the next thing is to head into the code. Now there are different ways of going into the code. You could click on the Visual Basic button here and go straight into the code window. On the left hand side you'll find slide 1, which if you double click will take you to the code window for slide 1. Alternatively you could simply double click Command button 1. That will also take you to the code window for slide 1, and it'll also open up this new subroutine specially for Command button 1. So just going to move that down a little bit. The code that we need, it's 3 subroutines. Well, it's 3 chunks of code. One is a declaration of publicly available variables. One is code which happens when we activate this particular slide, and the third chunk is the code which will happen when we click our button. So the first thing first of all, if you click right at the very top of this slide 1 code window, you'll find at the top it says General, and on the right Declarations. If it doesn't say that, you're probably clicking inside the subroutine for Command button 1. So just move that down and make sure you're clicking right at the top in the General Declarations window. Now we need 3 variables which we're going to use across more than one of our functions. The first of these is the array. Now an array, if you're not sure, is kind of a variable that contains a number of items, and that list of items itself is numbered so you can identify which item or which object it is at position 3, what it is at position 9, and so forth. So it's an array or a list of bits of information. In this case it's a list of all the words in our text file. We also want 2 other variables declared here, and we're just going to call them word1 and word2. More about those later on. So I'm going to press enter and it draws a line under that. That's that declaration section. That's that done. The next bit of code we need is the code which will first of all pull the text file from our folder. So in this case I've got my text file here called words, which contains all of the computer science words that I'm wanting to use. So it'll pull that text file into a variable, and then it's going to split that variable up so that each word is a separate item in our array. So that's what the code is going to do. How do we trigger it? Well, we're going to trigger it when this particular slide, this starting slide, the first slide of my presentation, is active. So this is what we need to do. So we're going to have a new subroutine, and we're going to call this on slideshow page changed. Now this is a standard, this is not me naming this randomly, this is a standard subroutine within PowerPoint which allows us to activate code when we change slides. And we can then say, well, if you've changed slides and you are now on this slide, do this code. That's basically what this is doing. So we just need to put in by val, because we need to know the number or value or position of this particular slide. Close the brackets, there we are. So there we are, we've opened up this new subroutine, and the first thing we need to do now is to identify if we are in fact looking at the starting slide. So if presentation dot slideshow settings dot starting slide. Now I'm choosing just to have one slide here, so that this is going to be the starting slide. But if, for example, like the demo I did earlier, you have a title slide and then your second slide is the one with all the code on it, well then you would simply change this to say equals 2. So if it is the second slide. But in this particular case, it's going to be my starting slide. So if we are on the starting slide, then what do we need to do? Well, the first thing we're going to pop in here is the word randomize. Now, we are wanting to generate random numbers later on. That's actually quite a challenge for computers to do, and the problem with VBA is that if you ask it to come up with a random number, then it will simply jump into a string of what looks like random numbers and start churning them out. But unless you put this word randomize in, you're going to get that same string of apparently random numbers every single time. So in other words, you'll always get the same pair of numbers each time you run this game or presentation. So in order to make sure that these random numbers really are random each time we play this game, we pop in that line there. Now the other thing we need to do is just make sure that those two labels that we added are blank, because labels, those ActiveX labels, will retain whatever content has been added to them at last. So if you play this game and you had a word in each of those labels and you closed your presentation and open it again, you may well find, if you've saved it, that those labels still show the last words that you had. So we need to make sure that they are blanked before we begin our game. So label 2.caption is also blank. And now what we need to do is find that text file. Now what I'm going to do here is, rather than putting a specific path to a specific text file, what I'm going to tell PowerPoint is to simply say, look, where are you? Where is this PowerPoint presentation? Look in that folder and just simply find me a text file called words. So we're not putting in a full path, we're just saying look at what folder we're in now and find a text file in that folder called words. That way you could then pass on this presentation to other staff, other colleagues, other students or whatever. They could use it and put it into any folder, make multiple copies of this if they wanted to, and just simply change the words in the words file. They wouldn't have to go back into the VBA code and start changing the code for where the file is. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, I'm going to create a new variable called path, And what does path equal? Well, it equals active presentation.path, so the active PowerPoint presentation, where is it? And also the word words.txt. So what I've done there is put a backslash, because obviously it's part of a full path, so we have to add the backslash, then the name of the text file. I've called it words, but obviously you can name it whatever you want to. And then don't forget the extension .txt as well at the end there for a text file. So that's it. We've now identified where this file is. So we need to open it now. So open path for input. So we're going to open that and we're going to input it. There we are, as number 1. Whoops. I said as number 1. I didn't type as number 1. There we go, as number 1. And then we're going to have another variable. I'm going to call it file content. Just the content of that file, obviously, equals that file we're just inputting. And we need the whole thing, so we're going to put length of file and then a #1 to identify the one we have open. And then once we've done that, once we've got all of that text from our text file, we can close the connection to that file. So we've opened it, we then closed it. Always a good idea. Right, so now we have got that text file in our presentation into a variable called file content, but that's not much good to us, because what we've currently got now is that entire list in a single variable. There's no way of identifying each individual item. So what we have to do is split those words up and then put each of those words into our array. Remember the array that we created at the beginning called my array. So what we're going to do is say that my array equals, and we simply use the word split. Now what are we splitting? Well, we're splitting that variable called file content. How are we splitting it? Well, all I've done with that file content, or that text file, is to press enter at the end of each line. So I've written a word, pressed enter, written the next word, pressed enter, and so forth. So how do we identify the enter as the way in which we're breaking each item? Well, we type VB, Visual Basic, CR, carriage return, LF, line feed, which is like the old typewriter ding back to the beginning of the line. If you, of course, had a text file where you were separating each item with a colon or a comma or semicolon or something, you'd simply change it to show that. So close my brackets then, and we need to just end our if, because remember we opened an if at the beginning here. If we are on the starting slide, then do all these things. Otherwise the code would happen every single time we changed to a different slide. So there we are, we've ended that. That's that subroutine. Let's just close up that gap. So we now need to put the code in our button. That's the final thing to do. So we've got our text file, we've split it, we've put it into our array, it's all ready for us to start pulling those words out at random. How do we pull the words out? So first of all, what we're going to do, that variable we had at the beginning called word1, we're going to say that's going to equal an integer. And how big is it going to be? Well, it's going to be as big as, or up to as big as, the upper bound limit of our array. And then we times that by R&D to make sure it's random. So this simply says choose a random number, that's a whole number, an integer, and it's between 0 and whatever the upper bound, the maximum number of items is in our array. We're going to do the same thing for word 2. So at this point, of course, word 1 and word 2 don't equal the words themselves from that array, they just simply equal numbers. But using those numbers, we can then calculate what is the word at that position in our array. Now, of course, there is a possible problem. We've generated now 2 random numbers. It is possible, especially if your list isn't terribly long, that those are the same. So it'd end up with the same word listed twice, and you probably want to avoid that. If you do, well, one way of doing that is to say do while, so going to be what we call a while loop, do while word 1 equals word 2. So if word 1 does equal word 2, okay, do the following bit of code. And all we're going to say is make word 2 equal a random number. So we're going to simply say, do it again, choose another random number. And keep doing that until word 1 doesn't equal word 2. That's it, we can end our loop by putting loop at the bottom of it. So we now know we've got 2 random numbers that are different from each other, and they are between 0 and whatever the highest number is in our list of items in our array. So all we need to do now is put those words into our labels on our slide. So remember the names that we spotted earlier on. The first of those labels was called label 1, and it's the caption that we want to change. And it's simply going to equal whatever is in my array at position word 1. And then of course our label 2 is going to do the same, except in that case it's going to equal my array and brackets word 2. And that's it. That's all the code we need to get this game working. So I'm going to click on the Save button, and then we can close the Visual Basic side of things. And again, as I say, you can make this look much more pretty and do all sorts of fancy stuff to it. But for the moment, I'm just going to simply leave it as a basic working model. Now, if I press F5 to play my presentation, you'll see that the two labels have been cleared, so they are now blank. And if I click on this button, I am randomly pulling out 2 words from my text list. And if I keep on clicking that button, you can see how we get random pairs of words from our list. And all I'd need to do if I wanted to choose a different list, say I wanted to do one for geography, or I wanted to do one for history, or whatever it might be, is to simply go into my folder and change this text file words. I could simply move that off to another folder, or add a different text file in here and just rename them. And that's it. That's all there is to it, really. I hope that's fairly clear. I will put, obviously, all of the code that I've used in this in the box below, in the description below. So if you want to just copy it, then obviously you can do that. That's no problem at all. But I hope that by going through it line by line, it's made a little bit more sense. So if you need to change anything at all, if you need to tweak it a bit, then you can do that. You sort of understand a little bit more about what the text, what the code is doing. So if that was useful to you, then please do give this video a thumbs up. It does all make a difference. And of course, it would be fantastic if you could subscribe. That would be brilliant. Become part of the Tech Train Club. So thank you very much indeed for taking the time to watch this video, and I look forward very much to seeing you in the next video.